I told you there was a film remake, the very idea of which being so offensive to fans of the franchise that they refused to see it in theaters? Sit the hell down, we're talking about the Pink Panther. The Pink Panther franchise started in 1963 with its first film starring Peter Sellers, and there have been several movies since. There was also a cartoon that started in 1969 and ran for 10 seasons. The films follow Inspector Clouseau, who's an incompetent detective, as he attempts to solve crimes, sometimes involving a precious gem called the Pink Panther diamond. Bit of a tangent, but in my research I also discovered that there's an actual crime organization in the world called the Pink Panthers, and they are jewel thieves. I would have never guessed that jewel thieves were an actual thing because it seems really cartoonish, but I was kind of pleased to discover that. Hopefully that's not offensive to anyone who's ever had their jewels stolen. Okay, I'm gonna give a summary of the 2006 movie with spoilers now, so skip ahead if you haven't seen the movie yet and you're interested. The film opens with the big crime, with a jarring cameo from Jason Statham as the victim. Statham plays a soccer mogul named Yves Glouan, here the owner of the Pink Panther diamond. And we're introduced to his pop star girlfriend, Zanya. By the time the game reaches full time, it's tied. So the game goes into sudden death. And I would just like to say that that's not how soccer works. If the game is tied by full time, they would break briefly and then play a miniature 30-minute game. And then if it was still tied after that overtime game, they would alternate teams taking penalty kicks until someone won in like a best of 7 situation. But anyway, France wins the big game and everyone, including Glouan, rushes the field to celebrate. In the chaos of the celebration, Glouan is killed with a poisoned dart, and the Pink Panther diamond, which was in his possession, is gone. Flash forward, and the French police chief, Dreyfus, is desperate to solve the theft and murder. So he decides he's going to hire the least competent detective he can find in France to distract the media so that he himself can solve the actual murder unbothered and then accept all the glory. So he chooses Clouseau, a blundering low-level detective played by Steve Martin, and it appoints him a partner, Ponton, a lovable, competent, stoic detective. Clouseau's first strategy is to seek out the people who are closest to Glouan in proximity and in his life before the murder. At one point, he follows Zanya to New York to keep tabs on her. When returning to France, Clouseau causes a big misunderstanding at the TSA airport line, resulting in bad press and making him seem to the public unfit for the job, which, he probably is, but...
He was just found dead.
Was it fatal?
Yes,
How fatal?
completely.
I want to talk to him now.
This big humiliation is kind of the emotional low point of the film. Police Chief Dreyfus decides it's his time to shine. He publicly demotes Clouseau and decides he's going to arrest his main subject, a Chinese businessman named Dr. Peng, at the presidential ball. Meanwhile, Clouseau is moping, but he's jolted out of his state of sadness because he's solved the case. He and Ponton sneak into the ball, stop Dr. Peng's arrest from taking place, and reveal the truth. Before Glouan's death, he had secretly proposed to Zanya and slipped her the Pink Panther diamond as an engagement ring. And it was Yuri, the trainer, who committed the murder. Pink Panther doesn't come up on any lists when I search for top comedies of the 21st century, nor is it usually mentioned in major discussion forums in which people ask, what's your favorite comedy of all time? In fact, I've never met anyone who talks or thinks about it unprompted. If you go out and search for people's thoughts, there's usually 2 categories of reviews. Those who saw it and loved it, like these people, and then there's those who refused to see it because they love Peter Sellers too much, like these people. And then I guess there's a smaller third group of people who did see it and didn't like it because they love Peter Sellers too much, like these people. Obviously, this stuff is subjective in a lot of ways, but I do think the hate is a little unfair, and that this remake does try to stay true to the charm of the original film. Steve Martin clearly has an appreciation for the Peter Sellers performance, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's possible this movie didn't do better because it came out in this weird time where adults were part of the Peter Sellers generation, and some of the kids who were young enough to be willing to embrace a new Clouseau were also too young to care about a Pink Panther movie. I mean, I think before this movie, I only knew about the Pink Panther because of those ice cream bars they used to sell at the ice cream trucks. I probably saw it because I loved Steve Martin. It did do pretty well in the box office, but maybe those little things working against it kept it from totally blowing the roof off the place. Right off the bat, this movie is stacked with jokes. It's so packed to the brim that while researching for this video, I kept unearthing new things I didn't catch before, which is saying a lot because I've watched this movie like 200 times since I was a kid. This movie is incredibly quotable. Here are just some of the moments off the top of my head that my husband and I quote constantly. It is lovely, was Evan. Can't you see she's sexy? I don't have time for this. I have to solve a murder. Good one.
Oh, it's you.
Click the button that says download. Yuri the trainer who trains. One thing that makes it so fun to watch is Steve Martin's physicality with the character. The world of this movie isn't totally absurdist. It has moments of absurdity for sure, but a lot of it feels somewhat grounded, unlike other comedies like Airplane, in which the whole world is part of the joke.
Smoking or non-smoking?
Smoking, please.
Here, have a nice trip.
In this world, Clouseau kind of is the joke, with some exceptions. So I imagine it's tricky for an actor to play into physical comedy for a character like that without totally going off the rails. Even in really dialogue-heavy scenes where it doesn't seem like there's many opportunities for physical comedy, Clouseau carries himself like he's the smartest person in the room with these smug little micro-expressions.
I'm sure you're quite the raconteur.
Yes.
When I watch clips of Peter Sellers' Clouseau, I feel like Steve did a great job at taking what made that version so funny and just dialing up a little more for a modern audience.
Well, that felt good.
We need fresh towels in 204.
The sweet spot for pacing humor changes over time. Humor changes over time. So while I think Peter Sellers was really funny in the original films, the Steve Martin version really hit that sweet spot for the humor of my generation. I think that's the ideal way to do a remake. Try to keep what people loved and then add something new. One complaint I saw a few times from haters was that Clouseau's accent is offensive, but I haven't been able to find any French people saying that. It seems to be a complaint that people tack on in an attempt to justify their already negative view of the film, but I could totally be wrong. Steve Martin apparently worked with a dialect coach, so his French accent would come from a foundation of accuracy, but also be absurd and dialed up. I think it lands. It doesn't seem to me like it's making fun of French people, but rather just making fun of Clouseau himself, especially because there are other French accents in the movie that come across as expected.
I was trying to catch a killer.
You were trying.
But obviously I'm not the expert. Even if you don't remember much from the movie, you might remember the "I would like to buy a hamburger" scene. It seemed to really stick with people. It reminds me of acting classes I've taken in my life and how they teach you to try different tactics when reading lines. I feel like every different way Steve Martin delivers his lines just enhances how absurd the moment is.
Two?
Toi?
Two?
Toi?
Bye.
Charlotte Mayer plays the dialect coach and does an amazing job at playing a foil to him. I think she's just as responsible for making this scene hilarious as Steve is. The hamburger bit is funny on its own, but the real payoff is when he's trying to explain to airport security that the bomb dogs are alerting because he has several hamburgers in his pockets, but he can't say it right and they assume it's something dangerous. This moment makes me laugh so much.
I've never seen that stuff in my life.
Jimbo?
You don't need Jimbo.
This hamburger thing is a good example of the way bits in this movie have repercussions and sort of spawn other bits. Actually, let me tell you my absolute favorite. During their investigation, a second murder occurs. Bisou, a soccer player, is shot in the team locker room. Clouseau and Ponton talk to a witness played by Kristen Chenoweth for some reason, and she heard Bisou right before his death say, "Oh, it's you."
And then there was gunfire.
Ponton.
Clouseau decides that they need to interview every person in France named You, which is obviously stupid. End of joke, right? Except it isn't. While doing this, they interview a woman named You, who rattles on in Cantonese for a while. Ponton asks, "Do you speak Chinese?" And Clouseau answers, "Of course I speak Chinese. If I didn't speak Chinese, why would we be here?" End of joke. Except it's not. During the big climax of the movie, Clouseau is explaining how he solved the murder and what really happened. And he references what You said in the interview room, which he did understand fully and which was pivotal to solving the case, which is kind of the real punchline of the whole thing.
But Ponton, think back. You were there.
I just think they did a really good job of writing this movie with but and because rather than and then. That is to say, the plot isn't just a series of disjointed events that happen one after another. They're a series of dominoes that fall on one another.
One clue leading inexorably to the next.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a lot to ask from a movie. Yeah, that should be the bare minimum. But tell that to The Snowman 2017. I'm a sucker for a good ridiculous slapstick moment that comes out of nowhere, so I wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite bits of the movie from a deleted scene that didn't even make it to the final cut.
You looking at something? It's my friend. I would like you to come down
To the station!
I really appreciate that the movie feels really filled out. Sometimes with comedies, they'll keep the sets and cast limited, probably for the sake of the budget, which makes everything feel kind of lonely and small. But here it feels like every set and location has love poured into it. The intro soccer scene feels really buzzy and real. There's a scene where they arrive at a big fancy casino, and it feels super lively, even though when I look closely, there can't be more than 30 extras in any given shot. That's movie magic right there. All right. Let's talk about what went mid. I have to fight every molecule in my body to say this, but fine. The Pink Panther isn't perfect. Ugh. But my complaints are very few. I love Beyonce. I think she makes great music, but anytime you put a musician or a politician or an athlete into a movie, there's a pretty good chance they're gonna feel kind of robotronic. Beyonce's acting is okay, but not amazing.
I was in New York to see a diamond cutter. He might draw the wrong conclusion. Or the right one. After Gluon came to me, he said he decided to stop cheating on me. Then he asked me to marry him. You're very kind. I was angry. I caught him with another woman. This was after he said he loved me.
I do really appreciate the original song she made for this movie called A Woman Like Me. It has these amazing dramatic strings and totally feels like the quality and style of her other music of this era. Another mid thing in my opinion is some of the jokes that lean on the raunchier side. Everything is still generally family friendly, but the few jokes on the raunchier side of that spectrum just aren't as funny in my opinion. I don't have any issues with raunchy humor necessarily. I just don't love it in this movie, if that makes sense. There's a joke where Clouseau is asking to inspect someone's big brass bowls, and because of his accent, it sounds like he's saying balls.
Okay. Thank you.
Han Dynasty.
They give a lot of space for this joke, which kind of just draws attention to the fact that it isn't as funny as some of the other bits, even in the same scene.
That's odd. What they did, they went like this, and then...
The murderer is caught and...
But you stood to gain.
Gluon was siphoning money.
Simon Edward, didn't you? Well, I can certainly think of a better place for these. It's my personalized cell phone tone ring.
There's another one where he performs the Heimlich on Nicole, and Ponton walks in, and to him it looks like they're engaging in adult activities. But the actual funniest part is when the egg she's choking on gets dislodged from her throat and flies out the window and hits a cyclist who then crashes into a lemonade stand that explodes. There's also a scene in which Beyonce and Clouseau are gonna hook up, I guess, and Clouseau is gonna take a pill, which he loses.
My miracle pill for the middle-aged men.
The premise of the scene is just awkward.
Or the right one.
But all the secondary jokes in it are pretty funny. It's such a small gripe I have because these awkward moments are so rare and fleeting, but I have to mention them for the sake of fairness. Okay, I have a story to tell. Years ago, I started remembering a scene from a show or a movie in which the character was boarding a plane and walking down the aisle back to his seat. As he walks back, the condition of the seats worsens as he continues further and further back to the point of absurdity. I remembered there being animals and crates and trash fires at some point. The joke being that his assigned seat for the flight is so far back that it's sort of lawless back there. It was just something I kept thinking of when I was having to endure shitty conditions or like I was in a situation that kept getting worse and worse. I started searching for the scene so I could show people when I referenced it. My memory was hazy at best, but my first instinct was that it was Steve Martin and the scene was from The Jerk. I also thought maybe The Naked Gun since it was that kind of humor, but I quickly realized that I could not find this clip anywhere. It truly seemed to not exist. I asked all my friends, some of whom are really good at finding media that I'm hunting for, but to no avail. I searched everything I could think of for the better part of a decade trying to find this clip. I really started to feel like this was part of a Mandela effect, like I had somehow peeked into an alternate universe. Because why would I make this up? Like I got this from somewhere. Anyone I mentioned it to had suggestions that made sense. Maybe it's from Airplane, or Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, or an SNL sketch, but it wasn't any of those things. Finally, in the year of our Lord 2025, when I was researching for this video, I happened to stumble across a horribly pixelated video posted 14 years ago by a user named Riverdry, titled Pink Panther 2 Outtake. Oh my god, It was the scene. I must say, I welled up a little bit. I was thinking I was crazy, and yet here was proof of my sanity. I've watched it maybe 12 times since then. Not to be dramatic, but I feel complete. I do want to mention that the title is misleading. This is a deleted scene, not an outtake, and I'm 99.9% certain this was from the Pink Panther 1 because Beyonce is in it briefly and she wasn't in the Pink Panther 2. Also, my family only had the first Pink Panther movie on DVD, so I wouldn't have seen the bonus features from the second movie. I definitely understand why they didn't include this scene in the film. I think it probably just tipped a little too far over the absurdity line. Even though it's funny on its own, I think it would have just felt a little out of place. I've seen tons of comedies in my life that have made me chuckle, but a lot of the more subtle humor becomes kind of forgettable. It feels like when we were kids, these goofball comedies would come out and there would be all these little moments that stuck in our brains and made us quote them ad nauseum. I feel like I hear a lot of people these days say that they don't like comedies that try to make them laugh. I really think a comedy that tries to make you laugh isn't cringe. It's a labor of love. And if the standard is to make you laugh without trying, I think we're going to continue to have subpar comedies. I think that's why I keep coming back to the Pink Panther over and over again, because it just really scratches an itch from a bygone era. I guess what I'm saying is that a good comedy is like a
Artichoke. You have to do a bit of work before you get to her heart.
I think if this movie had been a standalone thing and not an existing IP, it could have gone into the same pile as some of the other comedy greats of the time, like Bruce Almighty and Napoleon Dynamite. It sounds like there's a new Pink Panther movie in the works starring Eddie Murphy, and I'm excited to give it a chance. I know better than to judge the movie before watching it just because I love Steve Martin's Clouseau. I will not be making the same mistakes as my forefathers. Anyway, thanks for listening to me talk about this thing I love so much, and if you enjoyed it, please consider becoming one of my first subscribers. Okay, see you later. My mustache fell off. My mustache sort of has a mind of its own, doesn't it?